Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Today, on another LinkedIn Live together with Dream Data, I've got Drew Brucker, a friend that I met during numerous conferences nowadays, and a person who moved around in some roles from marketing leadership and now looking into AI generated imaging. Drew, welcome to the show. Such a pleasure to meet you.
Awesome to be here with you. I'm super excited. It's a great way to kick off the week.
It is. Drew, if you were to give people a quick intro to yourself, what you're doing right now and what people can learn from you today.
Yeah, I'm a marketer by trade. I've been in marketing in the startup B2B SaaS environment for several years. And, mostly at early stage companies, right, where things are moving quick. There's a lot of priorities. Things are a little bit crazy. But I love that, right? Like, because you can utilize some of your creativity, you get more of a tangible impact on the things that you're working on. So those are the types of things that have excited me. And obviously, with the way that AI has just evolved and exploded over the last year and a half, my curiosity just sort of drove me forward with that, specifically around some of the AI image component, and how that factors into the business world, right? Like having that go from fun to business utility has been interesting to see. And I've been able to kind of prove that out at my past company. And that led me ultimately to start my own company, where we focus on creating brand at scale through visual identity and leveraging AI to do it. So that's just a fancy way of saying, hey, look, like there's a huge gap right now that marketers have between stock photography and professional photography. And there are a lot of compromises with time and money that come with those things. And there's a whole possibility that opens up when you leverage AI. And we're going to dive into some of that today. So I'm excited to share that and answer any questions. So, if you guys have questions, shoot them over to us and we'll address them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, any questions, jump into the chat. You can ask them far ahead already now before we start with the smaller AI generated images talks. But we're going to dig into the details of it. How does it apply to business and all those types of things most of the people are excited about? So, let us know what questions you've got or maybe concerns that you are already aware of if you tried it out already. The cool
100%.
thing is, Drew, that there are so many specialists that self-learn specialists most of the times from how to use AI prompting, especially for text. But for imaging, I haven't met way too many. And when I saw you starting to dig into that and creating your own libraries of how to do stuff and guiding people on that, I think this is crazy exciting. But how did you start with all this? If you could give us a quick story.
Yeah, great question. Like there's a difference in terms of the way that I picked up, sort of the LLM chat GPT thing and something like Midjourney, which is just a tool that you use for text to image generation with AI. And for the Midjourney side, I've been a photographer as well. So, one of the things that I like to talk about is I always had a passion for that side. And then I had twin girls 2.5 years ago. And then all of a sudden I had no time to do photography, to do the editing and things like that. And so when a tool like Midjourney became accessible, right? It was just like, oh, this is interesting. I can create any image from my desk. I don't have to pack all my gear. I don't have to spend hours editing a photo. I can just sort of leverage my creativity and imagination from here, right? And it doesn't involve me, getting on a plane to go to Peru, to go to Machu Picchu to get the shot that I want. And I think like, look, there's no replacement for that. But I think, in terms of the lifestyle component, that was super interesting to me. And when I started to dive into that, the technology continued to get better and better and better. And it just got to this point where it went from fun, right, to having like this utility in the business world. And that sort of opened my eyes. And I was a marketing leader on a team, right, that had constraints with time, with money, with compromises that we were making, some on the brand side, right? And so it just kind of became this inflection point of, I think I can try to do this in what we're doing right now, right? Which is think of the use cases for all of our images. And what if I could use AI to solve that problem instead of stock photography, instead of hiring a photographer? And I just kind of went head into that, right? And so we proved that out over at my last company, right? And rolled that out in a number of use cases. But that was sort of the start of it for me. And now, you know, I'm all in on it. It's an exciting time. And, you know, it's an exciting time for brands because they can start to unlock some of their creativity in the process.
Yeah. And if we take it back a little bit, did you only try out Midjourney? What tools are there available to do AI generated images?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's a good point too. Like, we don't even have to talk specifically about Midjourney. Midjourney is my preference for the tool that I use, but let's just throw it out there, right? There are plenty of other options, right? You've got Dolly, which is now integrated directly in with ChatGPT and the multimodal functionality, right? Where you can just plug that in. You've got a tool like Stable Diffusion, Leonardo. There are a handful of others, Ideogram, Meta just launched their image generator, which I just did a post about over the weekend. So, I mean, there are other tools out there. They're all a little bit different. So that was sort of how I landed on that. But yeah, I mean, it's just sort of like a fascinating experience and time. I sort of forgot the original question now that you had me name those out.
No, it was just that. It was the tools that were there.
Those are the tools that are there right now. I think it's continuing to, you know, build out too. I think there are still others that are getting in the game. Google's sort of gone into that space too, where they're developing that. And like I said, they're all a little bit different in terms of what they offer. They're all a little bit different in terms of where they're at in their sort of progression as well.
Yeah. And most of the discussion today will be around Midjourney, but if you're using anything else, I'm sure that most of that functionality is kind of similar still.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about the inspiration, and how do you use Midjourney for inspiration as a brand, as a company?
I mean, the fascinating part about this is you can utilize AI to solve really any industry. It's industry agnostic. And what I mean by that is you could be a B2C company, you could be B2B, you could be in a niche, you know, like a very niche space. Like, you know, in my last role, we were in live event production, right? And when you are thinking about the brand and you're in charge of the brand and how do I develop an identity, a visual identity for a brand like this, it's tough, right? Because your first instinct is what images already exist out there. You know, so you might scrape, you know, a stock photography site. You might spend hours digging through something that kind of feels like you, or right, you say, hey, like, let me hire a photographer. We're going to map out all the shots we want in the locations of the ICPs that we want, doing A, B, and C, right? And then you get those back, but that's expensive. It takes time. And then it's sort of a finite delivery, right? Because what happens after you're done with those images? Are you going to use them time and time again, right? So it becomes this thing. And I think that's where the opportunity lies. And the use cases for AI are also super accessible, right? So if you want to put together, you know, idea generation, ideation, mood boards, things like that, like that's a possibility within the tool too, right? Things that you just didn't have accessibility to before.
Yeah, we've got even Chris mentioning that. So thanks, Chris.
Yes. And Chris and I met a while back, but Chris is also really, really deep into the AI side. He's a great mind as well. So he's definitely worth a follow.
Yeah, perfect. All right. And what people are usually afraid of when using AI is to either lose creativity or to lose that personal touch, because everything just gets mushed together with everything else that other people are searching and so on. So how do you use that part to avoid becoming same for everyone? If you go for audiences or specific engagement and so on, walk me through your process of creativity on that.
Yeah, you know, that is really a good question. I think that might become more of that could be more of an issue with something like an LLM, because you need to really provide a lot of context, right, to become very specific and personalized in some of the output that you're getting. That can be done, obviously, right? But a lot of people may not take the proper time and due diligence to do that and to then accomplish that. I think it's actually easier to do with the image side, right? Because when you think about something like brand colors, you think about, you know, your ICP, how old they are, maybe their ethnicity, what they wear, like if they've got a uniform, for example, the locations that they often find themselves in, whether that's an office or it's at a coffee shop, right? Like all those things can go into your prompting to then create images that are very, very specific to you, to your
Would you
brand.
try to mimic your ICPs and the locations and the clothing, or
Yeah,
something else?
totally. Absolutely. And that's something that I was able to do in my previous role, right? So we were in live event production, and I can show you a visual example of this as well.
That would be
But
nice.
like wide age and ranges, but you had the same black attire. They were always at sort of these dark, moody live concert environments and so forth. And so you start to take some of those things and interchange them with something called like prompt templates, right? So you find some prompts that kind of work, right? So maybe I'm looking for black and yellow, and I want sort of like dim lighting, but then I want a range of ages. I want a range of ethnicities. I want a range of like somebody's got a beard, somebody doesn't, right? Like all these things, and I can prompt that in, right? So with stock photography, you're very limited in the image sizes. Who is who's appearing on the image itself. You can't interchange those things currently. That could be something that stock's changing in the future, but right now you can't. So I think that's an important thing to mention. So I'm going to pull this up.
Yeah, that'd be very cool.
And share this so we can kind of get a little bit of visual with this as well.
Yeah, I need to put that.
So like this was like something I put out not too long ago on LinkedIn. I think it was last week, right? But
very pretty.
You can kind of go into something where you're taking your style guide, what makes you, right? Like what is the personality that you're trying to get across, and start to detail your brand out, right? So what are some of the feelings that are associated with your niche, your product, your service? How do you describe those things, right? Like, so for us, it was things like, hey, look, there's some empathy that takes place. There's diversity, there's dark environments, there's highly technical people, sort of this get it done attitude. Who is your target audience, right? Like, so attire, here's what they wear. Here's their age ranges, their genders, their ethnicities. Here's where they're typically located, right? And so you can start to pull together images that feel cohesive. They have the same look, right? Your key messages and values that come with that. The subjects and elements. So maybe you're taking photos of people, but what are the things outside of the people, right? So audio equipment, camera equipment, right? Where are those things located? Well, they're located at live events, concerts, festivals, conferences. Here are sort of our colors, right? So we think about black, yellow, white. There's a high contrast, sort of a neon look, right? So you can do all of these things for your brand and really assess that, taking into account your brand guidelines and the brand that you want to be, and see if you're making any sacrifices there, and then start to create things that are consistent, right? Because you can see in examples like these are all very consistent. You get the same look and feel. These are not cookie cutter images, right? They stand out, they're different. They put you in the shoes of you as a user. So if I am a live event producer, or I'm on site where I buy this type of software, I can see myself in these shoes, right? So all these things come into play. And then, like I said, you put these into something like a prompt template, right? So if I've got different ages, different genders that I want to pop out, different job titles. So maybe I've got a camera operator, I've got an audio engineer. Here's what I want them doing, right? So everything in brackets here is sort of like the dynamic part of a prompt. And then maybe something else, is more of like the static, right? So if I want a certain camera angle on all these, or I want a certain dimension, like an image dimension, those would be more of the static part, right? But the point is, you can create these in perpetuity, and that's a pretty powerful thing, because you can create sort of this branded library of images that are unique to you, specific to you, and you can use them all across the board for any kind of use case, right? So those could be blogs, your website, illustrations, mood boards, mock-ups, campaigns, emails, right? Internal, external, slide presentations, all of those things. And so that's why this is so powerful, is it's giving back the power to the teams. It's saving you time, money, compromises on those things. and allowing you to stand out in an already noisy space, because everybody's posting more content, and visuals is a great way to break apart from that because of, the authenticity of the brand that you can set up. And this does just that. Going back to your original question, it allows you to tap in to something that feels much more authentic, much more empathetic to your end user.
How do you strike the balance between quality and quantity? Because it seems like you can generate thousands of images real quick, but where is the balance?
That is, I think, one of the great unlocks to this is once you first focus on the quality of what you're putting together, right? So you need to do some R&D and experimentation with the types of prompts that you're building to get the ultimate images that you want, right? So if I've tried, several hours of iteration and I finally found something that works, okay, that 2 hours kind of sucked, but guess what? I'll never have to think about that again because I can just interchange these things. And 90% of the time, it's going to give me what I want. So I first focus on that quality and building the right prompt. And so I know what that output's going to be, generally speaking. And then I know I'm going to get high quality every time from here on out, right? So it's solving that quality to then get to the quantity.
Right. And if you take yourself back at the time when you started to work with Midjourney, it must have taken you some time to get those prompts right and to create those images. How was your process and where are you now? Like, how long time does it take to actually be done with that hard first part?
It's a great question. These models are built on scrape data and learnings, right? So there are some cases where maybe there's an item, like a very obscure item. I'm working with a client right now that is, looking for something around like a container tilter or a container loader, which is like very specific to like scrap metal, right? How many images are out there of that, right? And then to be able to compile those and put those together. Well, I think that really depends. For me, with what I did with the audio side, there was some experimentation, but it really didn't take me long. Maybe it took me an hour or two to find out, hey, this lighting kind of works really well with what I'm trying to get across. This is sort of like a camera operator, an AV crew, like finding those keywords, only took a little bit of time to develop, and others may take a little bit longer. So I think it's somewhat dependent on that, right? Like if the more obscure the niche, the harder it could be. But for the most part, you also need to take into account, am I just going with photorealism imagery or am I mixing in other things? Because it doesn't just have to be that, right? You could think about illustrations. You could think about more of like a cartoon. Like what's the use case that you're going after? And what's your brand? Because it may not just be photorealism. So I think there are a combination of ways to get to your end result, regardless of, the industry, the product, the service, or the offering that you have.
Right. What kind of common mistakes do you see people do when they start working with the AI generated images? What did you do as of mistakes? What were yours?
Well,
Your learning.
I almost view it as like even the mistakes aren't so much mistakes as they are like learning opportunities to refine and get better. And I know that sounds a little bit corny, but like I don't really know that there are too many mistakes other than like, hey, you generated an image and you're putting this out there in a business environment and somebody's got 6 fingers or they've got a third arm or a third leg or something crazy like that. Right? So, I mean, obviously that would be a mistake. I don't know that this is a mistake, but some people I think default to more of this, like they think it looks kind of real, but it seems a little bit cartoony, right? And it's like, everybody's doing that, right? So like, can you focus in a little bit more on the medium that you're going for, right? Like the actual style that you're going for. Is it a photorealistic shot? Then hone in on that and what those things are to become photorealistic in these prompting tools. That can be a little bit difficult, right? Because I think, you have to know some of these keywords or prompts or go through the repetitions to kind of get there. Or there's certain cameras or lenses you have to prompt for inside of it, using something like film stock or, specifying, hey, this is a portrait or a movie still. Those things help refine more of the photorealism approach. And so maybe it's that if I see anything, but honestly, I don't see enough people failing in this to really know for sure.
Try more, people.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to try.
There's a good question from Mary Jo. So do you know anything about like rights, licensing, or any art trademarks that people should be aware of?
This is a fantastic question. This comes up in, every live or session that I'm doing. And I think it's just important to note, one, I'm not a legal consultant, so don't take everything that I say as gospel here. But as with most things with AI right now, regulations are behind the technology, right? And so there hasn't been a lot of really solid groundwork laid in terms of the do's and the don'ts. But I do know some things that will help out quite a bit with this. So I think if you're going to use this commercially, you're going to use this for any sort of financial gain, right? So maybe this is more of like an artistic thing. I would stay away from using specific names of artists, directors, photographers, brands in your prompting, right? So, Nike, if you're going to put Nike in your prompt, I wouldn't go selling whatever you're creating. Now there's no technical rules on that right now that I know of, but I would stay away from that. And that's just sort of like a rule of thumb. But outside of that, you can get similar looks to artists or Nike or whatever using other keywords. So if it's Nike athleisure, right, you go for athleisure, you go for keywords that associate with Nike to get there. So that's one of the things that I would say. Also, there's another question that comes up quite a bit, which is around like copywriting AI images. And can those be copyrighted? Currently, the answer to that is no, because the way that that's viewed is, hey, look, there was no human creation or element that was guided in this output. Now, if you were to go and take that image and change something, add something, delete something, make it yours, add some text to it, then it becomes something that you potentially could copyright. And so that's kind of the way that gray area looks right now as well, which is a little bit uncertain for a lot of people. But I think when you're talking about using this for your brand, some of the things that I did, nothing there would be potentially harmful to use, right? I used lighting. I used the type of person that I wanted or the type of item that I wanted to showcase. I used the camera angle that I wanted to do it with, right? So I understood what kind of shot I was getting. And I used, things like color or composition, like how I wanted it to look. And I didn't use any names, right? So I have nothing to worry about there because you technically own those images in that regard.
Yeah. Another specific question was around SEO. Is it possible to use AI generated images for SEO in any way?
I'm imagining that you're talking about, hey, look, like I want to put this image, like let's just maybe use a blog, for example, and you want to put this image in your blog. I mean, just like anything else, and I know a good bit about SEO, but I'm not an expert. I would think that maybe you're talking about that similar point of like adding alt text to your images. Like, so it ranks. Like, I mean, yeah, you could absolutely use it in that regard. How powerful is that? I have no idea.
No.
I think it's something that's kind of TBD because we also don't know with the flood of images that have been created with AI, how those are going to be. Are those seen as equal weight in terms of, the images that already exist in the sort of web ecosystem?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is we've already created more images with AI in the last year and a half than we had in the last 150 years of photography. That's how many images have been created with AI. So soon, right? Like 34 million images are getting created by AI every day. I have no idea how Google's going to start to think about those as those continue to grow and grow and grow.
That's right. And one more question in terms of what's fair in terms of trademarks and so on. So you've got all those images in your Explore tab. Is it a fair game to start mixing them up and trying to create your own style in imaging? How do you feel about that?
Images from the Explore tab is fair games in terms of copyright. Yeah, it is. Right. So maybe what we'll do is I'll just show a quick example of what Natalie's talking about, because if you haven't been in Midjourney, maybe you don't know.
And while you're trying to find this, Peter has asked the question, where can he find all those handbooks? So go follow Drew as a first thing. And then if there's anything that you're missing out because he's putting that content out on LinkedIn, then reach out directly. No, Brew?
Yeah, I can help you out with that. That's not a problem. Just shoot me a message. So this is what Natalie's talking about with the Explore tab. So, you could go into these images, and this is what's powerful, I think, about Midjourney too, is it's more of a community aspect than some of these other image creators. And so a lot of people are trying to, they get to learn together. Here's a great example, right? It's like, I can see what this person put into the prompt, right? So if I wanted to generate that on my own, right, and take that exact same prompt, I could just copy it. I could go into Discord, right? I can type in imagine and I can run it. So this is going to create, it's going to take that prompt and create an image. Now, will it be the exact same image we just saw? No. Will it be close? Yeah, probably. So you could do that. But I think it's a great way to learn and reference, because there are going to be certain styles that you see in here. And you're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. What keywords do they use to get that style? Right. And so this is a great opportunity to learn, build on those existing prompts and so forth. So I know that's a little bit long-winded, but yes, you can remix these images. You can make them your own. And similar to my point earlier, these images here are not copyrightable, right? Because this is just straight out of Midjourney. There's been no human element attached to it. Here's the prompt that we just ran, just to give you a little bit of an example, right? So it obviously looks a little bit similar, but it's not the exact same image.
Yeah, very cool. And before we wrap up, if anybody has further questions, bump them in. We can still stay on for another 15 minutes to have a chat. But my final question is about the future of AI-generated images. So what do you see changing in the development of those?
In terms of like the technology, or how brands use them?
The technology.
The technology, I mean, there's a question in the chat too that I'm eyeing, and it says, why when AI generates images, it makes a lot of errors on the text. So this rolls into your question. That's going to get solved. DALL-E's actually really good at it already, much better than the others. However, I don't think DALL-E's the best tool to use. So, like we said at the beginning, each tool has a little bit of their trade-off, but that is something that I think gets fixed really, really soon. Midjourney's got a lot of big updates coming. I'm actually doing a live here in an hour just to talk specifically about those, but that's part of it. They're going to get better with the text. The other part of it is, look, like maybe the text in there isn't a great thing either, because when we're talking about the copyright component, maybe it'd be nicer to just take the image, put it in Photoshop, add the text. Now it's mine.
Yeah.
And now, you know what I mean? So like, as we're trying to navigate some of those rules and those regulations, like that's part of it too. But the technology is very interesting. You're seeing this, image component. You're seeing the video component, Laura. So I don't know like how familiar you are with like something like Runway or Pika.
Not enough.
This is text and image to video.
Yeah.
And this is changing the game too, right? Because brands talking about images, but brands are going to be thinking about videos and really being able to stand something up very quickly and be creative. And this is just democratizing the creative space in general. And so it's really exciting times. I think with the technology on image side, you're going to start to see like some of the fingers those situations are going away. That's going to get better. One of the other limitations that exists with a lot of these is when you try to get a far away shot of somebody, the faces start to mush. Right? It doesn't grab all the detail from my face from far distance when you're using these tools right now. I would expect that to get better. The other part I would say is we've talked about text, but I think there's a 3D component that's coming as well, which basically means, hey, if I wanted to take a photo of me, right now I'm limited to just this shot, right? And there's no character consistency. But what if I was able to kind of like jump into that shot and I was able to like scroll around and move around where I got to the side? I was able to go above or behind, right? And so an image or a scene that I create becomes sort of mine to manipulate. and guide around and move. So I think like that's coming. And, you know, these things are just kind of blowing our minds in real time because we've never seen anything like this.
No. And guys, if you would like to join Drew on a live session for Mid-Journey updates, it's in an hour, right, Drew?
Yeah, it's in an hour. Yep.
Yes, hit him with a message. He'll give you the link for it. So, Drew, thank you very much for today's half an hour spent together with us talking AI generated images. It was a blast. And if you've got any questions, guys, hit them over to Drew. He's happy to answer any of those.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me, Laura. Always good to see you.
Thank you. See you.